proceed to college. Valuable asset in today's society. Secondly, also, as you guys know, this program has been partly sponsored by Young Muslims, brothers and sisters. YM Sisters wanted me to make an announcement that they do hold bi-weekly halaqas, meaning every other Friday at the ISGVF Masjid during the family halaqa time period. So for the sisters, it's strongly recommended. It's by young Muslim sisters, for young Muslim sisters. So it's really, it gets down to the issues, and it's really beneficial for the sisters. So please, if you're available, next Friday there will be a halaqah, inshallah. And if you have more questions, ask Nimra. She's in the sister side, inshallah. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Imam Shadid to take it over.
Do you have something, a book or something I can set this up against?
Yeah. Do you want to set it up right?
Oh, that's perfect. You can just open it. Let me see. Take that off. You can just sit that there. No, give me that one. No, that one. And just like that one right there. Perfect. What was the password again?
So brothers, the sisters are gonna actually, because there's enough space, so if the brothers can move up, the sisters are gonna sit in the back in the same room. So please just move up. Thank you very much.
I think it was capital I.
Yeah, capital IQRA Institute. Was it 2016?
I think 2016.
Okay. Let's try that.
Oh. Just add it. Okay. Didn't work. Shukran. You guys ready? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. So from the look of the lecture, it looks like we're talking about gender wars, we're talking about men versus women and all of the bloodshed and everything. Sorry, that's not the route that we're going, right? But we are going to talk about how gender relations, male-female relations, especially within the Islamic community, within the Islamic tradition, how that is being challenged and how that unfortunately is, or fortunately, is going to change. People were created to evolve, to move, and to develop into higher beings of consciousness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "La tarakabuna tabaqan an tabaq," that you are going to traverse, you're going to move from one stage or one phase to the next. And there are multiple interpretations of this. Some scholars say that means move from this life to the barzakh, to the life in the grave, to the hereafter. And whether it's that meaning or the meaning in this life that you are going to move from phase to phase or stage to stage within your life, whether the latter or the former, what it shows is transition. That the human being is not going to remain the same. There is going to be a transitional phase that the human being is going to go through in his or her life. And with each and every transitional phase, then that means that the world that he or she is going to interact with it's going to be different. The values, our core values as Muslims don't change. The core values don't change. How we implement those core values will change. Do you guys agree with me? If I say something that you don't agree with, please challenge me. We're here to challenge you to be a better you. And the only way that you can be a better you is starting off by you being you. If you sit here and you agree with everything that I say, then that means that you want to be me. And the world doesn't need another me. If two people are the same, one of you is irrelevant. All right, so I don't want you to sit and nod in approval of everything that I say. If you disagree with something I say, just say, you know what, brother, I don't agree with you. And state your piece why you disagree, and let's have dialogue. And that is something that is also forcing us as Muslims living in this country to change, because in some other Muslim countries, some of which you guys hail from, right, there's clear dictatorship. Whatever I say goes. There is no critical thinking. There is no challenge. There is no speak truth to power. All of those, liberties that have been given to you by your American citizenship, that doesn't fly in other countries. But here, you have the right to exercise that. And we should make good use of that, all right? Because part of being a good Muslim is critically analyzing and thinking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges us all throughout the Quran. That if this Quran had been from other than Allah, you would have found in it much contradiction. It's a challenge. Until today, to this date, there has been no contradiction found in the Quran. So this is challenging, to be critical thinkers. But in our lives, as we transition from one phase to the next in our lives, the values that we have in Islam, the value system that we have, the belief system that we have, those things don't change. Intermingling will always be haram. There is no sugarcoating that. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, لا يخلون الرجل مع امرأة يعني الأجنبية إلا ومعها ذي محرم. That a man should never be alone with a woman except with a mahram. That will always be haram. And we cannot look at the change in our society and where we live and say, well, because the society that we live in, because those are core values and they don't change. How we implement those core values, how we exercise those core values, how we are able to implement them, those things will change. Because there are certain situations that is just, you go into a hospital with an emergency, you have a gash, a 2-inch gash in your forehead, and the only physician that can see you at the moment is a female and you're a male. Guess what? Do you sit there and bleed to death because you can't let a woman touch you? Right? Or do you understand that due to circumstance and situations, as Allah says in the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah as much as you have the ability. Right? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that command? And give us so much room in that command, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that as the human being evolves, as he transitions from one phase or one stage of his or her life to the next, that things are not going to always be the same. You guys follow me? We're not going to always be able to interact with the religion in the manner that we would like to. I remember one time a group of brothers came from America to come make Hajj. And when I was a student in the University in Saudi Arabia, the University of Medina, at that time, what we would do is we would take the Americans and those that came from our localities, and we would take them to some of the houses of the scholars that lived in Medina, some of our professors, to introduce them to them, some of these great names that you guys read books about or you hear about all the time. And so we went to visit one particular scholar. He used to teach in the Haram. I'm pretty sure he probably still does. His name was Ali Nasr al-Faqihi. Great scholar, and he teaches in the Prophet ﷺ's masjid. So we went to his house one time, and the brothers, they had questions. They would always ask questions, and we would, as students, we would translate them from, English to Arabic to the sheikh, and then translate his response or his reply from Arabic to English back to the brothers. So one of them asked a question. It's slipping my mind the exact question that he asked. And the sheikh said that before I answer your question, I want to ask you a question. He said, if I answer your question, he said, can you practice this in America? And the brother said, no. He said, well, then why are you asking about it? He said, you're asking about something that even if I told you it was permissible Islamically, you in the locality, in the country that you live from, when you go back to America, you're not going to be able to practice that. So why ask about it? The point that I'm making is that even though our religion, as vast as it is, as broad as it is, in certain times we're not going to be able to practice certain things. Does that mean that we should just toss that out? Does that mean that we should just totally disregard that or discard that from the religion because we can't practice it right now? No, it's still part of our religion. It's still part of our core values. All right, and although time is not, or circumstance is not going to permit us to practice it at this moment, nonetheless, it is still part of our religion. Who can give me an example of what I'm talking about? Somebody give me an example of something that is part of our religion that we believe in, is part of our core values, but due to the circumstances or the environments that we live in today, we cannot practice it today. Yes?
Maybe Hajj.
We can't practice Hajj today?
I'm saying like at a particular person at a particular time.
Will there ever come a time where we will never be able to practice Hajj? I doubt that. Too much money involved in that. So I beg to differ.
Like interest-free in this country.
He said interest-free. Right. Great. Does that mean that now, because we can't really, because a lot of the systems that we deal with here, they deal with interest, banks, they own a lot of property, they own a lot of things, they own cars. So when you go and lease a car, the car dealership doesn't actually own the car, or they do own the car, but the note on the car, the bank is going to cover that. So the bank is, once you put the money down on the car, you're no longer paying the car place that you got the car from, you're paying the bank. Which is why they repo your car when you miss the payments enough. They send someone to go repo the car because the bank cannot afford to take that type of loss. The car dealership could possibly take the loss, but when the bank begins to pressure them for the money, then they have to do something about it. So does that mean now, because it's very hard to engage in any type of transaction here in America without being involved in some level or some form of interest, should that mean that we should just now say, just toss out interest altogether and just say, don't worry about it? Afallahu amma salaf, that Allah will forgive us for everything we did in the past, and just khalas, and just go and engage in it? Or do we understand that that's still part of our core values? That riba, engaging in interest, is something that is haram. It's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, take notice, فَأْذَنْ بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, that take notice of war from Allah and His Messenger if you engage in it. So it's something that maybe we may not be able to engage in, or something we may not be able to fully practice at this moment, but it is still part of our core values, and we don't just toss it out the window. Another example of something that we may not be able to practice right now, but it's still part of our core values, part of our religion, and we don't just totally ignore it or discard it.
Like separating guys and girls in classes?
Very good. Separation of male and female. The most ideal situation would be to separate the male and female. And I mean, keep in mind, that doesn't mean because you have many Islamic schools where the male and females are separated. And sometimes the male and female separated actually causes more fitna than it does if they weren't separated. Yeah. Because man desires what he can't have. When you go back to the story of Adam alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to eat from every tree in Jannah with the exception of this one tree. Is it ever a wonder that had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not told him to don't eat from that tree, would he have ever desired to eat from the tree to begin with? So it wasn't the tree that became a fitna for Adam. It was the command not to eat from the tree that became a fitna for him. Because we desire, naturally, what we cannot have, what we're told we cannot have. So when you separate male from female in the classroom, then it sends a signal to children that, okay, this must be the forbidden fruit. right? And we desire it even more because we can't have it, opposed to putting male and female in the same classroom and possibly not having any problems at all. You follow what I'm saying? So it's not the utopia that we think it is by separating male and female. Although Islamically, it would be the most ideal situation to have males with males and females with females. And it would be the most ideal situation. Nonetheless, we live in a co-ed society. Almost impossible to separate the sexes even within our own institutions as Muslims. And when you think about the Prophet ﷺ's community, they weren't separated. They did Jumu'ah and Salat just exactly as we're sitting right here. And there wasn't any fitna. And someone would say, well, they were the most righteous of generations, and they never had to worry about it. They were still human beings. Don't remove that from the scenario. They were still humans. And incidents did happen. One of the Sahaba was staring at a girl as she was walking by. The Prophet grabbed his head and turned his head this way. No, don't look at her. Another companion was looking at a woman as she was walking by, and as he's looking at her, he's walking this way, but looking at her, and he hits his head on something, and he has a gash in his head. He goes to the Prophet ﷺ and tells him what happened, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Anta abdun aradallahu bika khayran. فَمَنْ أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِعَبْدِهِ خَيْرًا عَجَّلَ لَهُ الْعُقُوبَةَ فِي الدُّنْيَا." He said, you are a servant that Allah actually wanted good for. That when Allah wants good for a servant, He hastens His punishment in this life. So the fact that you got your karma right here, that's a sign that Allah wanted good for you. These were incidents that happened. Incidents of zina that did take place. So although the most righteous of communities of the Islamic community, that still does not eliminate the human element. It doesn't eliminate the human element. The mimbar that we talk about, that we benefit from, the 3 steps that is in every masjid, right? That idea came from the women in the community. One of the women came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that the women, we sit all the way in the back and we can't see you because of the men. These were big men. And the women sitting in the back, they could not see the Prophet ﷺ. So one of the women suggested that, why don't I have a maidservant, why don't I have him, who's a carpenter, Najjar, why don't I have him make a mimbar for you with 3 steps? So when you step up, the women in the back can actually see you. That's where the concept of the mimbar came from. Concept that women in our communities don't even benefit from today. Because the mimbar is usually on the men's side where the imam stands, and the women in the community is in some remote corner of the masjid, right? Or in the basement, or upstairs on the 2nd floor, or around the corner somewhere, and they sit in this one 4-corner room, this box sometimes with no TV, sometimes the microphone doesn't even work, it can't hear. I mean, the worst of conditions. And the mimbar was created for them. So the point that I'm making is that, we have to be realistic in how we interact with the legislation of Islam. You have the most ideal situation, and then you have our situation. And we have to find a balance in between that. But as it relates to gender relations, the way that men and women interact will always be based upon how the woman's role evolves. Why do I say that? Because in the Islamic tradition, right, men are usually the more dominant. The men are usually the patriarch. Men are usually the authority. Men are usually, right? You get where I'm going with that. That's usually how it goes Islamically. Women are the homemakers. They're behind the curtain. Talk to them behind the veil. And these are all core values in our religion. All right? But as the women's role begins to evolve, then our interaction with them changes. I'll give you an example. One day, hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari, one day Umar radiallahu anhu is having a conversation with his wife. فَرَاجَعَتْهُ, and she began to talk back to him. And Umar became upset, you're talking back to me. And his wife said to him, well, why are you getting mad or angry with me because I'm talking back to you when the wives of the Prophet ﷺ talked back to him, and some of them even boycott him for a whole day? And Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, قَدْ خَابَتْ وَخَسِرَتْ مَنْ فَعَلَتْ ذَلِكَ. He said, the woman who does this, any woman who does this, there's no good in her, and she has forfeited all good to come to her in this life. Aren't they in fear that if they anger the Messenger of Allah, they're going to anger the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And he knew that his daughter was from amongst the women that was married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he went to his daughter Hafsa to find out, do you guys talk back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and do you boycott him for an entire day? Now, mind you, this wasn't the norm. Because Umar mentioned in the same narration, he said, "Nahnu ma'ashar al-Quraysh, yani ahlu Mecca." He said, "We, the men of Mecca, kunna naghlibu nisa'ana." That when we were in Mecca, we were more aggressive than our women. Male-female relations. In Mecca, we were more aggressive than our women. He said, فَلَمَّا انْتَقَلْنَا إِلَى مَدِينَةٍ. Then when we came to Medina, قَدِمْنَا الْمَدِينَة, we came to Medina, we migrated from Mecca to Medina. رأينا أن الأنصار هم قوم يغلبهم نساؤهم. He said, we found the Ansar to be the type of people that their women were more aggressive than them. He said, and then lo and behold, our women started to imitate the women of the Ansar. So now you have Meccan women talking back to their husbands, right? Be careful who you let your wives hang out with. So what do you notice from this? You notice that there was a particular demeanor that the men from Mecca and women, there was a particular interaction that they had that was normal for them. That the men in Mecca were they were much more aggressive than their women were. But when they got to Medina, they found that the Ansar were the type of men who were not necessarily docile, but their women were more aggressive than the women. So then the women were more aggressive than the men. So then what happens is the women from Mecca who migrated begin to see this behavior, and they begin to incorporate the same behavior in their character. So now that forces the men to deal with them differently because things have changed. We're no longer living in Mecca. That is no longer, the environment. And I mean, this is saying that the same holds true to many children, many of you who are sitting here right now, who your parents migrated here from another country, but you were born and raised right here. And so now your interaction with your parents is a lot different than your parents' interaction with your grandparents. And parents can't figure for the life of them what in the world has got into you guys. We raised you in this culture. We raised you like this, and you talk back to me. You talk like this to me, and I don't like it. But they fail to understand that you have a different experience. And that's not to say that, obviously disrespecting your parents is never okay under any circumstances. But our interpretation of disrespect is different. The way we interpret disrespect. In this culture, for a parent to talk back to the child, or the child to talk back to a parent, is not necessarily, many parents don't consider that disrespectful. They don't consider that to be disrespectful. They consider that as the child being able to express him or herself, giving them free range to express themselves, and they don't necessarily view that as disrespect. Whereas people who come from a different generation, they may look at that as the utmost disrespect. So, our relationship with women is going to change as their role changes. So fast forward today where you have many women, Muslim women, who are now being bombarded with a lot of ideas like feminism, which is running rampant in the Islamic community, where women have it's now giving women a different role than the more docile homemaker role that she once had. Sit at home, have baby after baby after baby, and let the husband go out and make all of the money and make all of the decisions. All of that has changed. Women are now the breadwinners. Women now make more money than many of their spouses. Women make just as much money as their spouses. Women have now free range to do certain things that they never had before. And so that now forces us to deal with them differently, the same way that Umar, the Prophet ﷺ, and the rest of the Sahaba had to deal with the women differently. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari, she said that if the Prophet ﷺ could see how the women changed themselves, he would have prevented them from coming to the masjid. If you remember when the Prophet ﷺ لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله وبيوتهن خير لهن. Do not prevent the female servants of Allah from attending the houses of Allah, but their homes are better for them. That was what the Prophet ﷺ said. And the women used to come out and they used to pray Salatul Fajr. They used to come out and attend the congregational prayer, right? However, when the Prophet ﷺ died, things changed. The women started to do what is called tabarruj. They used to come outside beautified, right, in a manner that they never did when the Prophet ﷺ was alive. And Aisha, seeing the women like this, she said, Wallahi, if the Prophet ﷺ could see how the women have changed, he would have prevented them from coming to the masjid. But as, the times change, is Aisha's, obviously, she's stating that if the Prophet was alive, this is what he would have done. But that shows that it wasn't done. So women were now coming outside, with tabarruj, coming outside, adorning themselves and beautifying themselves. And although we can't stop it, it forces us to deal with them differently. So all of these things contribute to the way that we interact with one another in terms of gender, male and female relations. A man came to Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhum, and he married a woman. And he wanted to complain to Umar about some of the stipulations this woman put in her marriage contract. I hope I'm not giving any women ideas. He came to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu and he said, أن هذه المرأة اشترطت أن لا أنقلها من بيتها ولا أتزوج عليها. فقال عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه لها ما اشترطت. He said, O leader of the believers, this woman that I marry, she stipulated in her marriage contract that I cannot marry her and move her out of her home, and I cannot marry another woman while I'm married to her. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, لها ما اشترطت. For her is what she stipulated in the marriage contract. So the man said to Umar, well, what are the men supposed to do if women are given this type of power where they can stipulate something in the marriage contract and then we have to oblige them? Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he made a very famous statement. He said, Inna maqati al-huquq inda shurut. He said, your rights as a husband has been cut off from the moment you sign your name on the marriage contract. So all of the rights you thought you had, if you agree to it on paper, all your rights go out the window. You have to abide by the contract that you signed. So if she stipulates it in the marriage contract, you have to adhere to that. Of course, if you agree to it, then you have to adhere to it. Put women in Islam in a whole different position. Gave them some level of authority, so now men had to respect that. And this is what Islam came to do. But now you find today, fast forward, you guys understand the concept I'm trying to drive home? I just kind of mentioned example after example after example, just trying to drive home the same concept. That as women's role begin to change, it forces us as men to deal with them differently. So when we look at in 2017, how has the American Muslim woman's role, how has it morphed? What has it morphed into? How has it changed? And how is it forcing us as men to deal with them differently than before? Question. We all live here. We all see what's going on here. What is happening to our women in the Islamic community here in America?
Like women in the workforce?
Women in the workforce? Okay. What about them in the workforce? They're there in the workforce.
Like, I mean, yeah, it's becoming more prevalent than it was like 20, 30 years ago.
Okay, so Muslim women are now in the workforce in droves. So being a stay-at-home mom is not necessarily something that we should expect, right? We go in with the expectation that she's going to stay at home and have child after baby after baby after baby. But in her mind, no, I'm pursuing my career. I didn't graduate from a university to sit at home and have baby after baby. I'm pursuing my career. So we can no longer go into the marriage with the expectation, all right? The mother of all frustration is expectation. And we need to remove some of those expectations. Unless you state your expectation up front and she's agreeing to that, then that's one thing. But to go in silently expecting that this is the role that she's going to play, you're sadly mistaken. What else is happening to...
Yeah, you kind of clarified it in your second part, but like the idea of being a homemaker is being diminished in society, that it's not valued anymore.
Being a homemaker is not necessarily valued anymore, even amongst Muslim women. They're now purchasing the home. They're not making the home, they're buying the home. They're buying the homes. And, this socioeconomic status that is now being given to women, and of course, make no mistake about it, that is by design. That is by design. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said that أكثر من يخرج مع الدجال النساء, that the vast majority of the people that come out to aid and support the Dajjal will be who? Women. Absolutely. Authentic narration. The vast majority of the people that come out to support the Dajjal will be women. He said, so much so that a man will go home to hamimatihi wa ibnatihi wa ummihi, that a man will go home to his wife and to his daughter and to his mother, and yarbutuha bil bayt, that he will tie her up in the home out of fear that she will leave out and go and support the Dajjal. And I mean, obviously, the Dajjal is not going to, pop up tomorrow and everybody is saying, let's go. There's a process to that happening. There's a process to that. And part of that is to get the woman out of the home. That's number one. So they've achieved that. They've gotten the woman out of the home. And we've acquiesced to that as men because we've had no other choice but to acquiesce to that. Then after getting her out of the home, now to increase her socioeconomic status. So now you have women in politics. You have our sister in Minnesota, Somali sister, who's, high up in politics. You have many other women, Muslim women, who are involved in politics, changing laws, enacting policies. It's happening. You have Muslim women who are now making money, millionaires who are making money, right? It's no longer the same. So this is all the process as it continues to morph, as it continues to gain momentum. It eventually becomes a point where women no longer need men. That's where it's going. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned, "Inna min ashrat as-sa'a," from the signs of the last day, and yaktafi ar-rijal bil-rijal wan-nisa bin-nisa. That from the signs of the last day is that men will find sufficiency with other men and women will find sufficiency with other men or other women. You understand? Al-iktifa, that a woman will no longer need a man. She will find sufficiency with other women. In another narration, he said, إِذَا اسْتَغْنَى الرِّجَالُ بِالرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءُ بِالنِّسَاءِ, that when you find men finding sufficiency with other men and women finding sufficiency with other women, then know that this is from the signs of the hour. And we're moving to that. We're moving towards that. Women are seeing marital situations crumble right in front of them, the divorce rate increasing, and they're saying to themselves, why go into all of that? I can get my needs met in my own circle. I don't need to go out and get married. I don't need to put myself in that type of situation and subject myself to all types of emotional pain, emotional scarring. I don't need to subject myself to that. I can stay comfortable and safe in my own circle around my own kind. And, it's happening. And of course, what is pushing women towards that is the whole idea of feminism. You don't need a man. Muslim women's rights. What rights are you fighting for in Islam? Islam is the most feminist religion on the face of the earth. If you're talking about rights that are due to you as a woman, there's no other religion in the world that has given women rights like Islam. So your fight doesn't become to get rights. Your fight now becomes to get the men and the maintainers of the community to acknowledge those rights and relinquish those rights. That's it. Not fighting for Muslim women's rights, because you already have that. But understand that these things are, creating changes in our community and the way that we interact. And so there's the ideal situation that we would like to have. And although we don't necessarily have that, I created something called the Maradiya Show on YouTube, where I interview, people in the community that were professionals in the community about certain topics and things like that. And one of the first episodes that I did was called College Culture and Marriage. And I interviewed a young couple, a young Bengali couple, young brother and young sister who got married right out of high school. And their parents objected to the fact that they were getting married, and they were basically on their own. Eventually, she went to college and graduated and is doing well for herself. And he, at the time, was in college, doing okay for themselves. And what we wanted to shed light on was how, marriage, although is a part of our religion, and when our young children try to get married, the parents become the biggest challenge and the biggest obstacle for them to try to get married. Almost as if the parents are okay with them having a boyfriend and girlfriend or engaging in those type of behaviors instead of getting married and being in the bond of marriage. And, this shed light on that. So the point that I'm making is that by interviewing this young woman and her husband, and there were some other episodes on there that I interviewed some women, I caught a lot of flack from that because people were saying, well, when is it ever permissible for a man to be interviewing a woman on stage in a public sphere like this? And I was aware of that. I was aware that there would be, because this is something that the Muslim community is just not ready to handle. We're not ready to face it. And so while you would find fault with me for interviewing this woman on a matter that was very important, pertinent to the Islamic community, we don't find fault in the other realms where the woman has to be alone with a man, or has to be in close proximity with men who are complete strangers and then sometimes not even Muslim. We don't find fault with that, but then we'll sit and pick Islam apart and we're trying to, bring some type of maslahah, bring some type of good to the community. We weren't sitting alone. There was an entire audience there. There was an entire audience there. Not to mention my wife was there. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we were alone in the room alone, but we'll sit and we'll say it's not permissible for him to be on stage with a woman or not permissible for him to be interviewing a woman, right? But then that same woman, once she leaves wherever we are, she goes to college, she works alongside of men, she goes to college, university with men, and all of the other walks of her life, she's intermingling and interacting with men, and in some instances, unnecessarily. But here we are providing a service to the Islamic community, and we'll do everything in our power to thwart, what is beneficial to the community, simply because we're caught behind these cultural lines and not ready to accept the reality that things are different. Things have changed. Things have changed, and it forces us to change. So, it's important for us to understand that things, the way that we interact with one another. The last thing that I'll end with is that although intermingling is haram, and although there are some situations in which it can't be avoided, what we have to do as Muslims is create boundaries. We have to create boundaries for ourselves, because a boundary is for you, not for the other person. You know how far you can go with this person. The other person may not know boundaries. Muslims don't know boundaries. I've been in circles where a Muslim woman sticks out her hand, "Assalamu alaikum, brother," and I'm like, no, I can't touch your hand. You can't expect that other people understand boundaries, but you set boundaries for yourself in terms of how far you will go. And that, inshallah ta'ala, will help you in terms of navigating through the challenging times that we live in. I mean, we can't be the type of people who say, all right, to heck with everything. We live in America, and this is our society, and this is our culture, and we just accept it. Qawlun wahid, ala ra's wal ayn. No. And we can't go to the opposite extreme and say, well, I'm just going to practice this no matter how socially awkward I look. I'm still going to practice it, right? I've often debated. I remember when Barack Obama was the president, I always used to say, if I ran into Barack Obama and Michelle stuck her hand out to shake my hand, would I shake her hand? And it was in public, in front of everybody. Like, I often played that out in my head because I'm very staunch as it relates to shaking the hands of women. No, it's haram. I'm not going to touch your hand. But then there are some times where you get put in situations where not shaking the woman's hand, it's just like, okay, we hired you. Thank you. We're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a good day. And she sticks her hand out. Like, she just hired you. You understand what I'm saying? And then you say, no, I'm sorry, I can't shake your hand. And for non-Muslim women, especially Caucasian non-Muslim, they take that hard. It hurts. I don't know why. Can anybody explain that to me? Why is that painful for a man to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't shake your hand? No matter how nice we say it, the look of disappointment on their faces, it's just like, wow, man. I just ruined this woman's day, It's almost like the Prophet ﷺ, they were performing Hajj, and one of his companions who was not a pilgrim, he went and he got, I think a donkey, or he got something, some form of meat, a lamb or something, and he knew that the Prophet ﷺ liked the thigh. So he saved that piece and he sent it to the Prophet ﷺ, and when the guy gave it to him, the Prophet just turned and he denied it. And the guy walked away and he was like really disappointed. And when the Prophet saw that, he told the army to go ahead, and he slowed his horse down until he was riding alongside of him. And he said, the only reason why I didn't take it was because I'm in a state of ihram. And I don't know if you chase game, if you hunt it to get that. And as a pilgrim, you're not allowed to hunt or help someone hunt. And the Prophet ﷺ just wanted to make sure he didn't violate his ihram. But when he saw the look of disappointment on the man's face, he went back and he explained to him why he didn't take it from him. And so sometimes, you feel obligated when you see that look on the face of, non-Muslim women, when you tell them, I can't shake your hand, and that look of disappointment on their face, and you just want to just say I'm sorry, I wish you understood how important this was to me, but sometimes but these are things that we have to, it's a judgment call. And someone can sit there and say, from a place of privilege, I would never shake a woman's hand, I would never touch a woman, it's haram, but you're saying that from a place of privilege. Because if you are stuck in a situation where sometimes you might have to, right? You might have to, right? I conduct a class on Saturdays and Sundays, how to get married and divorced in 10 weeks. I know it sounds weird. Trust me, it's a good class. Nonetheless, one of the subject matters we were talking about was being alone with a woman. And some of the scholars were giving, scenarios in which a person might be excused for being alone with a woman. And one of the scenarios they gave is that if you are on a highway, on a dark road, and you're driving by yourself, and you're in a car by yourself, and you see a Muslim woman on the side of the road trying to fix her tire, right? She's not putting a tire on. She's hoping that somebody sees the hijab, rides by, and stops and fixes the tire. Should you stop and aid this woman with her tire? Islamically, I'm not talking about how you feel personally. From an Islamic standpoint, should you or should you not stop and aid this woman to fix her tire?
I mean, it seems like the case of Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was picked up by the other Sahaba.
Very good. Ahsant. That's exactly the example that they mentioned. And he said that it's almost like the case when Aisha radiallahu anha, when she lost her necklace, right? And she went to go look for the necklace. This is the story that prompted the lie, the slander that was told on Aisha of being an adulteress, right? She lost her necklace that she got from her sister. And as she went to go look for the necklace, the caravan pulled off. Aisha was a little girl at the time. So in the area, the hodij where she sat, they didn't know that it wasn't heavy anymore because she was a light girl. She was a young girl, so she wasn't that heavy, so they couldn't tell that she wasn't in there. So the caravan left. And so Aisha's running around frantically looking for this necklace because it belonged to her sister, Asma, and she couldn't find it. And when she got back to the place where the caravan was, they were gone. And so she laid down, she started crying, and she went to sleep there. And she used to wear niqab, but when she slept, part of her niqab was on the other side of her face, so part of her face was exposed. So one of the companions, the one who they accused her of sleeping with, he lingered behind to make sure nothing fell from the caravan, and he saw Aisha laying there. He saw her laying there. And he knew it was Aisha because he saw the side of her face. He remembered what Aisha looked like before the women were commanded to cover, before they were commanded to wear hijab. And all of the Prophet ﷺ's wives wore niqab. All right? And he waited there until she woke. And then she got on the camel and he walked the camel all the way back to Medina. And when the chief of the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay, when he saw them coming in Medina, when he took the opportunity to go and spread the lie about her. So that's exactly the example the scholars mentioned. Like even in the case with Aisha, to see her there and then just leave her and say, well, this is intermingling. We have to strike a balance between that. There's some times when we have to look at the circumstances. And we can't be rigid to the point of black and white. Islam is not black and white. There's always gray area. There's always room where where it could be viewed from another perspective and possibly be allowed due to that particular circumstance. As in the case of eating pork, which is haram. But if you're about to die and the only thing that is available is pork, do you say, no, I would never eat pork? And you die, you die committing suicide for not eating the pork? Did you know that? To refuse to eat pork because you see Islam as being black and white and pork is haram and your life depends on it. And you refuse to eat the pork, you die as someone who committed suicide. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. Whoever is driven by necessity. A muqtar, you're driven by necessity. فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. That whoever is driven by necessity and he does not exceed what is necessary to sustain his life, then there's no sin on him. So get out of this idea that Islam is black and white and this is what it is and I must follow this. There has to be a middle course. There has to be a middle course between ifrat wa tafrit, extreme negligence and extremism in doing it. And there's the middle course in between those two, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. And likewise, we have made you a ummah, a community that takes the middle course. And of course, middle course comes with knowledge. You can't take the middle course without having knowledge. People go to one or two extremes due to ignorance. Sometimes people go to the right extreme of seeing things as black and white and that's it because of fear. They are in fear of falling into something that is haram, so it makes them gravitate towards an extreme position. And then some people become very negligent. They go to the opposite extreme of negligence because of ignorance. And what allows you to take the middle course is ilm, knowledge. Which leads me to my next point, and that is that starting September 19th, right? September 20th, inshallah ta'ala, I will be conducting a workshop, a series of classes on the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the Meccan period, inshallah ta'ala. And if for those of you who are interested, inshallah ta'ala, then please, or you're interested in registering, can they register tonight? Okay, you want to let them know about that? Go ahead.
So the program that Sheikh Shadid is referring to is our 4-year Deen Essentials program, and this is geared for high school students, 9th grade to 12th grade. It's a 4-year program, and it consists of 8 courses. The first course is starting September 20th, and that's about 12 weeks, 1 hour a week, and you're going to go in depth with various different topics. This particular course is the Meccan period, as Imam Shadid said, and it's a 12-week course. Every Wednesday from 7:30 to 8:30, and the tuition is, I believe, $199. And you can sign up tonight. It can be a life-changing experience to have this mentorship. The program is enrichment, educational, as well as a mentorship. There's a lot of challenges in high school. Imam Shadid has consulted and counseled and has spoken to so many different people in all walks of life, and these and the students can really learn from his mentorship, inshallah. So we really encourage you to attend. How many people here are in high school? Can you raise your hand?
Almost all of you.
Yeah, so we have a lot of high schoolers here, and please see us. If your parents are here, you can register tonight. In the first session is free. So if you're not sure, if you're on the fence, please come to the first session. It's absolutely free, and we can get you registered, inshallah. And if you have any other questions, we're going to go through some questions now. We have pizza also coming, inshallah. It'll probably be here soon, so we may pray Isha and then eat the pizza, depending on when it comes. But we'll get through some questions right now, inshallah.
They say you can tell a lot about a person due to the questions that they ask. You guys ask some really awesome questions, and some of them I'm going to have to jump over because they're a little above my pay grade. Okay, so I'm just going to pick the easy ones. And that's smart. The questioner asks, what should you do if a non-mahram keeps looking your way? And I don't know if there's a male or female who asked this question. A non-mahram, were you talking about a female or a male? All right. I'm taking it that a female is asking the question, and she's saying that a non-mahram, but he's Muslim, right? A non-mahram doesn't mean he's not Muslim. It just means he's not part of your family. And he keeps looking your way. And you try to avoid it, but they're still looking. I mean, it is natural. It's a natural attraction. I mean, like, it doesn't mean that because you're Muslim or you're a Muslim or you're a Muslim woman that you're not beautiful, right? It doesn't mean that because you are a Muslim and you wear hijab that you're ugly. You should not accept that as the standard. You are beautiful when you put on the hijab, you put on your crown. That is attractive to some people. Unfortunately, even some non-Muslims are attracted to that. So how should a Muslim woman react to something like that? Well, obviously, if you don't find the guy attractive, then, you know how women, you know how you guys do with putting people in a friend zone. Friend zone them. No, I'm not interested. I'm good. But I mean, if there is an attraction there, then okay, then what's the next step? If you are attracted to him, he's attracted to you, obviously, then what's the next step? And I mean, obviously, if you guys are in high school, then, I mean, there should be a healthy outlet where Muslim men and women, girls and boys can interact with one another under the guise of, or under the watch of the community. So if you have a father and he has parents or whatever, maybe you guys can, give the number to, and even if nothing becomes of that, at least you get a chance to talk to one another in a halal fashion. You understand what I'm saying? My son, and he's probably going to get mad at me when he hears this, but my son, who's 16 years old, I took him on his first sit down with a young lady. Older brother reached out to me and he said that, my granddaughter, thinks your son is cute and, would like, or I don't know if he necessarily thinks he's cute because she might be listening too, but nonetheless, would like to meet your son. And I said, no problem. So we arranged for us to have a dinner. We went over to his house and her mom was upstairs and me and, grandpops was downstairs talking, and we allowed them to talk with one another. And even though nothing became of that, at least they had a halal interaction. And as parents, we have to create those environments. We can't just say, well, no, you're not ready for marriage and just leave it. Sometimes it may not even be, it may just be an attraction. It may not necessarily mean that they want to get married right then and there. But just to have a few conversations, and sometimes what you see may not always be what it really is. You see the person, they're cute, and then after you have a few conversations with them, you realize this guy is lame or she's lame, and they just mad shallow, and I'm good. But you got it out your system in a way that was halal. You understand what I'm saying? You got it out of your system in a way that was permissible. And it's not about whether it morphs into a marriage or not, but we are creating environments wherein our children can have halal interaction with one another. So, if he's looking and, is someone that you're actually interested in, then you could say, hey, listen, I notice you're looking at me. There's two ways that this can happen. And only one is an option for me. And that's the halal way. The haram way is not an option for me. I'm not giving you my number. I'm not taking your number. It's not going to go down like that. If you are really interested, then you can see my dad. He comes to pick me up from school. If you're really interested, then we'll talk to him. If you're not interested, then it is what it is. But, we don't have to keep trading stares back and forth. And I know that's pretty bold for a woman to go up to a boy and say that, but it's 2017. What do you... It has to be legible. I can't get married. Well, obviously, if you are still living under the auspices of your parents, then you want to get married is a discussion that you have with them. But acting while you have a desire to get married, by you mean by saying that you have a desire to get married, you're saying that you are having some sexual tendencies, then you need to understand that marriage does equal sex. Because you are ready to be sexually intimate does not mean that you are ready for marriage. Your system, it's an institution that many of us are not ready for. And we cannot keep associating sexual tendencies and desires with marriage. One does not equal the other. You guys follow me? Just because you have an inclination towards the opposite sex does not mean, okay, I'm ready for marriage. And parents stop pushing their children into marriage because you see that your daughter is looking at boys now. Pictures of girls, or he's talking and communicating with girls, then you have to sit down and have a discussion with them. That is the time for discussion. That is not the time to say, all right, it seems like you're ready for marriage. Let's start talking marriage. You're not ready for marriage. And I did an entire lecture on 10 ways that you know that you are not ready for marriage. 10 things that are indicators that you are not ready for marriage. If you can go to my page, you'll find the lecture there. One of the ways that you know that you are not ready for marriage, if you are not emotionally mature. You are not ready to be responsible for somebody else's emotions. You are not ready for marriage. And so marriage requires us an entire institution, and we have to stop associating one with the other. But if you're ready for marriage, meaning i.e. you're ready, you're having tendencies or you're having inclinations towards the opposite sex and being married, then maybe you need to have a conversation with yourself and to tell yourself, number one, that these feelings are normal. These feelings are normal. And it doesn't mean that you're ready for marriage because you have an inclination. It means that you are a healthy, heterosexual individual. That's what it means. But it does not mean you are ready for marriage. And probably need to stay away from the opposite sex until you can have mature discussion about that. You mentioned that Islam gives women the most liberating rights. You give example by 2017 standards. What about Muslim countries? I can't speak about Muslim countries because a lot of them function on culture, not necessarily Quran and Sunnah. It's cultural. And we have to make a distinction between what is cultural Islam and what is Islam, right? But as it relates to by 2017 standards, I mean, just look at the rules. Just look at the allowances that have been given the religion. The allowances that have been given in the religion for Muslim women. It makes it very easy for her to practice her religion. It's very easy for her. Islam is not definitive in terms of how the woman's hijab and how overgarment should, look. It just gives her the command, and depending on what environment, what culture, whatever, and that will dictate what it will actually look like. And that's liberating. I mean, in terms of her having knowledge and access to knowledge of her religion. I mean, there's this Islamic scholarship from women has been overshadowed in recent times, but Muslim women were some of the greatest scholars of Islam. Aisha was number one. Some of the Tabi'un said that we never found a problem in our religion that we didn't understand, except we would go to Aisha and she had some knowledge about it. Nothing. It's great scholarship from the Tabi'un, the Tabi'in. Hasan al-Basri, he married his daughter, Sa'id bin Musayyib, one of the great scholars of the Tabi'un. He married his daughter to one of his students. And the very next day after they got married, that morning, the husband is putting on his clothes, and the daughter says to him, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to the dars of Sa'id. I'm going to the lesson of father." She said, "Ijlis, inni u'allimuka ilm Sa'id." She said, "I'll teach you the knowledge of my father. You don't need to sit with my father no more. I got you." I mean, like, it's like scholarship. I mean, all these things. So, all of there are not really many parameters preventing Muslim women from engaging in, different levels of society. Somebody asked a question about, women, being more politically and socially active. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think women have to educate themselves to their religion in terms of creating boundaries for themselves, creating parameters for themselves, knowing how far you are going to go, right? And being aware of that. How do you create a balance between being too out there and not being out there, not being active enough for women? I think one of the things that will help with that is going back and looking into the history books of Islam and looking at the role that women play. There are volumes that have been written, albeit still in Arabic, but there are volumes that have been written on women's role in rectifying and creating, being active in their community. And that will help. Why is the sign